The time is what the clock shows, Deltron Dupree. Chapter 1, Part 1, Linda. The chemical plant could be left behind. He looked one more time at the glow of the green halo over the smokestacks, activated the DNA sequencer, and opened the neuromatrix replicator program. "Do you still have time to cancel?" said the girl. "Just go for it. Hit that damn button." The machine started. It loaded cell data into the digital avatar and disconnected the brain cortex connection. His body twitched as his mind detached from his physical form, and the avatar loaded onto the hacker's mind matrix. He was online. A ghost disengaged from his body, heading towards a virtual city known only as a legend to many Deltron inhabitants. It was nighttime. Rain lashed against the building's windows as Max sat at the computer. Duprix's sirens sang their melody, and that dark tune of despair filled the room with its ambience, like the final note in a lost game. Duprixie was ruthless. Its brutal streets and alleys didn't care. Gangs ruled their own territories, dedicated to their ideologies, whether knowingly or unknowingly. Willingly or unwillingly, they were slaves to a system they were both prisoners and guards of. It was an established state, and no one knew how it all began anymore. Oblivion had wiped out the history of what the currents of the past had achieved when Tellus 81's deep net was burned like a river when one of Deltron's hackers got tired of everything, wiped the accounts, emptied the records, and dropped crap. What had happened then was forgotten. Some speculated that Duprixa had been an old corporate core, whose shopping centers and residential complexes were left to their fate in Deltron's hyperinflation and later fragmented into blocks. Others suspected that the Highlands had merely dumbed down the peripheral areas as their control became unprofitable, with power and credit streams drying up. Duprixie was salvageable, yet nothing was done. Max tapped on his computer. He had found a link to a dark server on the satellite network that he had been searching for months. The computer connected, and the server responded. He didn't know what to expect next, but the hacker's curiosity to unravel the mystery that the message boards were buzzing about had awakened his interest. Finally, he had found what he was looking for: the Nexus Core. 2 weeks earlier, Max sat in the hazard bar at the border between Block 6 and 7. It was a place where hustlers from different blocks gathered to negotiate and do business in the name of their guilds and cults. For Max, it was an opportunity to gather information from hustlers as he worked as an operator in synchronizing data points between the blocks. Anyone could upload updates to the data automaton. Likes and negative feedback determined their place in the newsfeed hierarchy. Advertisements, gossip, political messages, escorts, doomsday religious sermons, music, anything was available for direct download into the user's consciousness from the data automaton. Max connected chips collected from hustlers and uploaded them into his deck, took puffs from his cigarette, and inserted the next chip. He updated the data points one by one, keeping the interblock news up to date on the sector's data automaton server. It was a way to maintain order. If the interblock data points were connected to the net, they would be vulnerable, so only trusted operators were authorized to update them. Max was one of them. That night, he came across a hidden message in the low feed about Nexus. "Do you want to live forever? Square 2 is an endless oscillation rooted in a smaller equation at the Nexus core. Come, fly to the Ghost City." Max removed the chip from his deck and placed it in the system management tool. The program was written to check for viruses and data automaton attacks. It was Max's work. He suspected a virus. If it was a protocol-compliant virus, Max would remove it, but he still ran an analysis for the sequence that followed the comment. The analysis ended. Hidden in the glitch was an audio track comment. "Nexus is found in the soul, hopeless to live without the capacity to complete its roots. Come meet me where kingdoms collide. Rex." The comment, attributed to a user named Rex, sparked curiosity in Max's neural network. He felt that the message meant something he couldn't quite describe. Maybe it was his youth or the beginning of schizophrenia, but a 23-year-old can't have seen much of the world. That naive curiosity was a sign of his passion for life and the mysteries that had crossed his path. He packed the chips, returned them to the hustlers, and left the bar. It was 4 a.m. but he had decided to travel to Block 17 to meet the locals in case someone there knew the mysterious user behind the nickname Rex. SkyTrain hummed. Its flight engine was ancient, and there was no other type of flight engine expected on the outskirts. Max lit a cigarette. Through the train's window, he could see the horizon of Deltron's skyscrapers. Above it, sky spots rose for the super-rich who no longer needed to dwell on the ground. Max admired its beauty as the flying vessels formed light trails in the sky, and he wondered about the life they led and the privileges they enjoyed. For a moment, he could relate to the life of the wealthy, but the jolt of the train's engine brought him back from that daydream. Deltron was Max's home. That megacity was a complex city built on top of itself over hundreds of years. Max belonged to the less fortunate, but he had secured a stable job as a data automaton updater and earned a trustworthy reputation among his guild. It was modest, but that humility adorned him like the modesty others saw as divine. The cigarette burned. An announcement was made. Deltron Block 17 station in 5 minutes. Max didn't care about it. He lit another cigarette and opened his hip flask. He took a swig and reflected on himself. A cold sweat trickled down his neck. Was it fear, or was it due to the night's humidity and lack of sleep? He thought it didn't matter, but he was still about to do something he wasn't entirely sure about. Max stepped out of the train. The station smelled of exotic food. Lake rats with vegetables, dog kebabs, tortoise and grasshoppers, a street food cart, he ordered. It cost a measly 4 microcredits. Cheap and good, he thought. Xian, he thanked and continued his journey. Block 17 was on the outskirts of the city. It was accompanied by a lake that could be mistaken for a sea. By the lake's shore was a harbor and a bar where the locals and wanderers of Block 17 stayed overnight. Max headed there. He walked in the rainy weather in the middle of the night, through those dilapidated and narrow alleyways, nibbling at the edges of his kebab. From alley to alley, block to block, he didn't draw attention. Black poplar, long hair, and optical implants made him completely inconspicuous on Deprick's streets. On his belt, he carried a weapon, a C-12 semi-automatic pistol. The magazine held 24 rounds, and he used FM-12 bullets, which were sure to penetrate cyborg armor. The kebab ran out. He tossed the trash on the ground and was almost there. From a distance, he heard the bass thumping. The name of the Block 17 hazard bar was Rajaporti, as its harbor allowed travel to another city where Max had never been. In fact, he had never left Deltron. He had spent most of his life on the outskirts of Deprick before proper city living began with its apartment complexes and coffin hotels. Now, with the ability to afford a small deposit from each of his guild's work benefits, he had settled down. However, the streets were still familiar to him from his youth, and even firefights weren't foreign to him. They didn't, however, stir this 182 centimeters tall man. Computers were his thing, the net was his world, and that's why he had come here. Max arrived at Rajaporti, where the bass pumped an 8-bit techno track. He nodded to the bouncer, who nodded back, welcoming him, and opened the door for Max. The cold sweat had subsided, and his aura calmed from the alcohol he had consumed from his hip flask on the air train. He surveyed the situation. The bar was filled with cult cyborgs, androids, and meatbags enjoying their last credits. Rajaporti's dance floor lights flickered to the rhythm of the music, and holographic patterns adorned its walls, reminiscent of the 3D movies of times past. Locals had gathered here to exchange news, drink, dance, and forget, but Max was there for a different reason. He walked up to the bar counter. It was old-fashioned, traditional, and resembled a classic pub counter. The bartender was a Latino woman with a metal hand and tattoos on her face. Next to her stood a blue metallic disco droid, dispensing virtual fixes to those craving them. VR emitrips, cheese. If real life didn't feel like anything anymore, or if the dopamine gates of the cerebral cortex had worn out from life's grim realism, the only pleasure was to get a new fix, to be someone else than who you were, to be somewhere else than where you were. It was cheap, but deadly fun. Yet, for many Deprick's residents, there was no other escape from their everyday lives. Dissonance caused by VR psychosis led to dark mental states, and once it hit, there wasn't much to be done. Max gestured to the bartender. "I'm looking for someone. His name is Rex. Can you tell me where I could find him?" The bartender turned her gaze. "Walk through that door if you want to live forever." She pointed to the back door and upstairs to the second floor, where a new bar opened up. The bar was elegant and had velvet sofas, giving off a calm and sophisticated vibe.